morning, guys! Today's tutorial is going to be pretty fun. We are going to be making a pillowcase cover. It fits a standard size pillow, and of course you can choose whatever fabrics you want. Today I'm making one for my nephew who absolutely loves Toy Story. Who doesn't, though? I thought his bedroom was going to be Toy Story theme, but he picked dinosaurs instead, but he's still going to love it. To make this pillowcase, you're going to need 3 coordinating fabrics. All 3 fabrics will need to be cut selvage edge to selvage edge, which is the finished edge. This is also called the width of the fabric. Fold the fabric in half, selvage to selvage, and then fold it over in half again. This will make it a little easier to cut. Your accent piece will be cut at 3 inches by the width of the fabric. The body of your pillowcase will be cut at 24 inches by the width of the fabric. And the cuff will be cut at 12 inches by the width of the fabric. Take your accent piece and fold it in half along the long side, and press. And while you're at it, you may as well iron everything else too. Once that's finished, lay your main fabric right side up with the selvage on either side. Then take your accent piece with the raw edges facing up and line that along the top edge of the main fabric. Take your fabric for the cuff and line that up face down along the top edge as well. Now you'll have all the layers lined up along the top with the selvages on either side. Pin everything in place. I recommend putting the pins parallel with the edge of the fabric. It'll make the next step a little bit easier. Here's a little bit of a closer view of what I mean. Move the cuff up and out of the way, and then take the bottom of the body and just start rolling it up. Once that's rolled all the way to the top, take the cuff and fold it back down. Flip everything over, and then fold the cuff down, sandwiching everything else in between. Flip it over again, check that all the raw edges are lined up, and repin everything in place. As you're repinning, make sure the part that you just rolled up will be underneath the seam allowance. You can see what I'm talking about here. Only one edge of the body is pinned with everything else. The rest is all rolled up inside. Sew along that edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now comes the fun part. Grab a hold of the fabric that was rolled up and start pulling. Once everything is flipped right side out, you can see that there's no raw edges along that seam. I can just hear all of those little squeaky toy aliens going, "Oh." If you've seen Toy Story, you know what I'm talking about. Give everything a good press and make sure that accent strip is down towards the main fabric. You can leave that accent piece as is, but I honestly think that would drive me nuts with that piece flapping around like that, so I'm going to take some coordinating thread and top stitch it down. Just stitch it down as close to the edge as you can get it. Problem solved. I think that looks much better. Now we need to even up the sides a little bit, so fold everything in half. Make sure everything's lined up because we're going to be cutting off the selvages on both sides. You can see that the width of all three fabrics are slightly different, so we need to even this up. Using a ruler and a rotary cutter, trim off as little as possible from each of the selvage edges. This side wasn't really that bad, but I just did it anyway. Now open everything back up and fold it wrong sides together along the other edge. Take your time and make sure that the seams and the trim line up perfectly. Pin or clip everything in place, and then sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance along the two raw edges. Next, trim down that extra fabric as close to the seam as you possibly can, maybe about 1/8 of an inch away. Do not cut into the seam. I repeat, do not cut into the seam. This is very important. Flip everything inside out and smooth the seams the best you can. Make sure you poke out those corners too. Just keep pulling and tugging on the seam and rolling it in between your fingers to get it to lay flat. Give those edges a good press and make sure the seams are as flat as possible. Keep finagling any areas where the seam isn't totally flat. Sew around those two edges using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Flip everything right side out, and you can see everything's nice and lined up, and no raw edges anywhere. Guess what? You just did French seams. Way to go! It looks so good, doesn't it? And how simple was that? These are perfect to make for a gift. Now go ahead and put it on your comfiest pillow and test it out by taking a nice long nap. Or by having a pillow fight!